The Mona Lisa. Anatomy of a masterpiece. There she is, poised within her frame. Her face is serene, almost ambiguous. She smiles, but whether from irony, melancholy, or quietude remains unclear. Her gaze fixes you, follows you, a silent interrogator, as if you were the work to decipher, while the landscape behind her unfurls like a dream. Misty hills, spiraling paths, a river that seems to truly flow, thanks to the interplay of azure hues that render it ethereal, perhaps concealing the soul of her laughter, a bridge between the human and the infinite. Her skin glows with warm, almost living tones, and her hands are so lifelike you might expect a tremor in her fingers. Light caresses her face, smooth as antique silk, where shadows and highlights dance in divine balance. Her hand, resting like a leaf on water, holds time itself in its breath. That smile is an unsolvable riddle. It shifts with every glance, perhaps due to the deliberately blurred nuances at the corners of her lips, rendering it elusive. This is art that breathes, defying time not through grandeur but through enigmatic simplicity. As you walk away, you carry a question. What has this woman seen to remain suspended between mystery and familiarity? The painting just described is undoubtedly the world's most famous. The Mona Lisa, also known as La Gioconda, housed in the Louvre Museum in Paris. And her creator, Leonardo da Vinci, is humanity's greatest genius. Leonardo was a weaver of worlds, an alchemist of form and thought. His mind knew no bounds. It soared from the flight of birds to the earth's depths, from the subtlest smiles to machines defying gravity. Every leaf, muscle, and ray of light was a code to crack, a question spawning 100 more. He painted with a scientist's precision and studied anatomy with a poet's eye. In his notebooks, dragon wings coexisted with maps of the human heart, ideal cities with prophecies of the cosmos. For him, art and science were inseparable. They were the language through which reality unveiled itself, layer by layer. A restless visionary, his greatness lay in his way of seeing and his insatiable questioning. To him, seeing was not merely recording forms, but interrogating the essence of things, every observation a portal to unknown universes. Leonardo did not compartmentalize knowledge. Anatomy, botany, engineering, and painting were threads of the same tapestry. He left works unfinished, projects unrealized, notes chaotic, for he intuited that knowledge is a process, not a destination. He proved human ingenuity could transcend all limits. He was an eternal child who, instead of extinguishing the candles of mystery, lit them one by one, illuminating the dark with his imagination. Historians place Leonardo's execution of the Mona Lisa between 1501 and 1506 during his return to Florence. He had been absent from the city since 1482, when he moved to Milan under Ludovico Sforza's patronage, likely sent by Lorenzo the Magnificent. He returned only in 1501, after stays in Mantua with Isabella d'Este and journeys through Venice and Bologna. The Florence he remembered, the Renaissance jewel of the Medici, where he trained in Andrea del Verrocchio's workshop, had changed. Gone were the days of Lorenzo the Magnificent's enlightened patronage. The city was now governed by Pier Soderini, a man of limited cultural horizons. It was in this context that Leonardo began painting the Mona Lisa. But who was this woman in reality? In 1495, a Florentine merchant, Francesco del Giocondo, married 15-year-old Lisa Gherardini, a noblewoman from a declining family. He was a 30-year-old, twice-widowed man, his fortune, built on fine silks and usury, a marriage of convenience like many, yet destined to immortalize their names. Francesco was no romantic. His life revolved around contracts, yet around 1503 he sought to defy time's fleetingness. Perhaps to celebrate the birth of his second son, Andrea, or to flaunt his social ascent, he commissioned a portrait of his wife, not from any painter, but from the brilliant, unpredictable Leonardo. Though devoid of the Medici's aristocratic pedigree, Lisa's features bore the unyielding pride of the Gherardini, a once illustrious landed lineage whose prominence had eroded into genteel obscurity. During sittings, Leonardo allegedly filled the room with musicians and jesters to lift the melancholy veil typical of portraits. But where do all these details come from? The most authoritative voice for reconstructing the origins of the Mona Lisa belongs to Giorgio Vasari, a 16th century artist and historian. In his seminal work, The Lives of the Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects, published in 1550 and dedicated to Grand Duke Cosimo de' Medici, Vasari penned what is considered the first true history of Italian art. The painting is known by two names, Gioconda, from her husband's surname, and Mona Lisa, Madonna, abbreviated for married women. Vasari described her smile as more divine than human, born from Leonardo's clever stratagem. Surrounded by music and laughter, Lisa revealed a joy none had seen, an expression hovering between a girl's shyness and a woman's wisdom forged by loss and rebirth. Yet when Francesco drafted his will in 1537, the painting went unmentioned. Lisa, aged, lived in a palace with no portrait of her youth. She died in 1542, unaware her face, transmuted by Leonardo into an enigma, would journey through centuries. Francesco, pragmatic to the end, never imagined his name would endure for a painting he never received. Thus, a silk merchant and a silent woman entered history, bound not by contract, but by an artwork neither saw completed. Mona Lisa sits in solemn pose, her torso turned left while her face meets the viewer almost frontally. This slight torsion, typical of Leonardo's contrapposto, creates silent dynamism, as if her body breathes within stillness. Leonardo structures her figure pyramidally, a geometric scheme infusing balance and monumentality. Her hands, subtle protagonists, converse gracefully. The right rests on the left wrist, which caresses a semicircular chair. Details reveal obsessive care. Center-parted hair falls in disciplined curls, a transparent black veil framing her forehead like wet silk. A scarf drapes her left shoulder with studied nonchalance, adding motion to her dark gown. Behind her, a balustrade evokes an imaginary balcony, opening to a landscape pulsing with life. Two slender columns, faintly suggested, flank the figure, their subtle presence guiding the eye toward distant azure mountains and sinuous winding paths. Leonardo reinvents contrapposto here. Head and shoulders twist along the same axis without breaking harmony. The slight misalignment between torso and gaze is no technical trick. It captures living humanity, suspended between tangibility and mystery. Her hazel pupils seem to observe the viewer, yet glance slightly leftward, beyond. Despite her elusive expression, a maternal gentleness emerges, leading some to speculate she might be pregnant. The tilt of her head and eyes suggests movement just ceased, as if she turned toward us in that instant. The Mona Lisa is not merely depicted, she radiates life, breaking Renaissance portraiture's rigidity, eternalizing a moment of humanity in motion. Her dress blends Renaissance elegance and symbolism. Dark green with gray undertones, its leonine sleeves reflect contemporary fashion. The neckline, edged with embroidered knots, incorporates the nodo vinciano, Leonardo's emblem for his Milan Academy, linking art and knowledge. The gown's delicate folds and the sleeves' rippled textures engage in silent conversation with the shoulder drapery, a stylish flourish of the era, crafted with a spiraling flow that mirrors the river's bends and the road's meandering curves in the background. This visual harmony weaves figure and landscape into a single tapestry, transforming the attire into a storytelling device. The transparent veil, interpreted as mourning or maternity, mirrors the work's ambiguity. She wears no jewels, her dignity needing no adornment. Every detail, from fabric to ornament, reveals Leonardo's fusion of realism and abstraction. The garment transcends mere clothing. It becomes a visual lexicon, binding the painting into a harmonious triad of Renaissance fashion, layered symbolism, and painterly poetry. Unlike other Leonardo subjects, she holds no symbolic objects. Her hands, free of allegory, communicate through delicate creases. This anonymity and timeless dress render her universal, an icon unmoored from history, pure humanity. The Mona Lisa's true secret lies in her mutability. Every era projects its desires, fears, and fantasies onto her. The 19th century saw her as an ambiguous, almost threatening sensuality. Earlier ages evoked serenity and gentleness. Leonardo painted not a face, but an enigma thriving in perpetual reinterpretation. Leonardo considered gestures windows to the soul. Hands and arms must reveal the intention of their mover, he wrote. Believing motion whispered emotions. He sculpted the moment a gesture hints at inner motion, capturing emotion's birth and fade, the threshold between human and universal. His art transcended physical representation to seize the subject's living essence, making painting a science of the soul. These inner motions transmute painting into a dynamic exchange where artwork and observer are no longer separate entities. To behold a painting is not to merely observe, it is to immerse oneself in its emotional essence. Art thus ascends beyond the visible, becoming a vessel to chart territories of the unseen. These motions of the soul bridge flesh and spirit, eternal and ephemeral. At the corners of her eyes and mouth, transitions between light and shadow simulate an expression in becoming, as if she's about to speak or smile. Leonardo revolutionized Renaissance art with sfumato, layers of ultra-thin glazes blurring contours into softness. Applying light over dark with fine brushes and diluted pigments, he achieved imperceptible transitions. The final result? Lips lack hard lines. Mouth and eyes dissolve into optical mystery. Under microscopy, brushstrokes vanish, leaving harmony that breathes. This mastery roots in Leon Battista Alberti's theories of edgeless faces where beauty weds grace. Leonardo perfected this, concentrating sfumato on expressive zones, giving Mona Lisa her indecipherable gaze. Her smile, unfixed, shifts with the viewer. Beyond her face and smile, the landscape is key to her allure. Art historian Angelo Conti described it as an echo of her smile. Sinuous rivers enfolding nature in universal laughter, harmonizing human and cosmic. Curving roads guide the eye from foreground concreteness to abstract azure mountains in primordial atmosphere. No trees or figures, just a bridge and path, minimal traces of civilization suggest a world between reality and imagination. Leonardo conjured this ethereal depth through his groundbreaking innovation, prospettiva aerea, atmospheric perspective, a technique that dissolved rigid lines into veils of light and air, mimicking how the human eye perceives distant horizons. While artists like Brunelleschi codified linear perspective, Leonardo introduced air's haze. Distant objects blur, colors shift blue. As he wrote in his treatise on painting, air thick with moisture veils the world like gauze. Distant mountains take on the hue of the sky itself, a spectral blue. Leonardo wielded this principle in the Mona Lisa. The craggy forms in the background dissolve into hazy grays and cerulean washes, their blurred edges conjuring both spatial infinity and the enigma of the unseen. Intriguingly, recent studies by Martin Kemp suggest the landscape was painted later between 1513 and 1515 than the portrait traditionally between 1503 and 1506. Vasari's silence on the background deepens the mystery. Perhaps Leonardo revisited the work to make it timeless. In this dialogue between figure and environment, Leonardo surpasses representation. He crafts a universe where every element, from symbol-free hands to boundless landscape, renders the Mona Lisa an icon, speaking through beauty and mystery. The debate surrounding the Mona Lisa's backdrop orbits a central enigma. Is it a faithful depiction of an actual location, or a visionary product of Leonardo's imagination? True to the Vincian genius's modus operandi, the answer likely lies in a masterful synthesis of observation and invention. The right side's multi-arched Romanesque bridge resembles the Arnos at Buriano, near Arezzo, which Leonardo sketched. This very bridge, once traversed by the ancient Via Cassia Road, was intimately familiar to the artist. He immortalized it in a detailed Valdichiana study, now part of the royal collection at Windsor. Yet the painting's surroundings, jagged rock formations, and a serpentine river depart dramatically from the region's actual lush plains, instead evoking the rugged geology of local landmarks like Pratantico Gorge, whose limestone cliffs Leonardo had meticulously documented in his notebooks. The jagged rocks recall Tuscan Calanchi, eroded cliffs, studied by Leonardo, echoed in works like The Virgin of the Rocks. Leonardo wasn't a realist landscapist. He fused geographic elements into ideal scenes. The rocks might also mirror Lombardy's Prealps, near Lecco, or Valtellina, seen during his stays in Va Priodata. The barren backdrop suggests a primal world, human presence reduced to a bridge and path, symbols connecting civilization and nature. The Mona Lisa is not just art, she bears time's marks. The work was executed on a poplar wood panel, 77 centimeters tall by 53 centimeters wide, a material chosen for its local availability despite Leonardo's documented preference for walnut or cypress. Technical analysis suggests the original composition may have included architectural columns flanking the figure, later cropped, likely during 18th century reframing or edge repairs. The panel's structural history is etched into its reverse. Two butterfly-shaped veneer inserts attempt to stabilize an 11-centimeter vertical crack above the sitter's head, while a series of cross-bracing battens added between 1825 and 1970 combat the panel's persistent convex warping, a common distortion in aged poplar supports. Leonardo prepared the surface with fine gesso, white base for the sky, red for the landscape, still visible in the road's curve. Oil glazes created seamless light/shadow transitions using ochre, vermilion, and lead white. Today, however, the palette appears dimmed and muted, a consequence of centuries-old grime and the amber patina formed by protective varnishes, layered like geological strata since 1809, which have collectively obscured the painting's initial chromatic brilliance. The Louvre's conservation team, keenly aware of the peril of irreversible harm, eschews aggressive interventions. This measured stewardship safeguards not only the painting's material essence, but also its immortal gaze, arguably the most scrutinized visage in art history. Her history is also written on its back. Labels and inscriptions document its movements. In 1792, during the French Revolution, it entered the national collections. In 1797, the inscription H29 marked its transfer from Versailles to the Louvre. After 1815, the code MR316 catalogued it during the Restoration. The surface, now marked by 500,000 microcracks, retains its paint layer almost intact. Imagine how the Mona Lisa might have appeared without the thick layer of yellowed varnish and centuries of dust. Vivid azure skies, a golden yellow dress, and a landscape of crisp tones. This revolutionary image was created in 1998 by the Nicola Laboratory in Aramengo, an Italian excellence in restoration, which produced a digital reconstruction based on scientific analyses and historical knowledge. By studying original pigments at the edges of the panel, where the frame had protected the colors, and applying Renaissance techniques, the team restored the Mona Lisa's lost brilliance, revealing a younger face and an even more enigmatic smile. This virtual restoration did not physically alter the artwork. The Louvre, aware of the fragility of Leonardo's Sfumato technique, has always refused direct interventions. Instead, digital processing allowed the cleaning of oxidized varnish layers applied between the 16th and 19th centuries, responsible for its current dark and shadowy appearance. The revealed details are astonishing. The sky, now gray-green, was once a clear blue. The shawl on her shoulder, now brown, once shimmered with ochre yellow. Her hands, now in shadow, were illuminated by golden reflections. In 2006, two French research centers validated this reconstruction in the book Mona Lisa Inside the Painting, acknowledging the accuracy of the Italian method. The study confirmed that Leonardo used a vibrant palette with red lakes, lead white, and natural earths, layered in ultra-thin glazes to create depth. Analyses also revealed traces of ultramarine blue in the sky, an exorbitantly expensive pigment derived from lapis lazuli, a sign of the patron's high status. This reconstruction, albeit hypothetical, brings us closer to the work as the artist saw it, before time and human interventions transformed it. Today, more than ever, virtual restoration proves essential for preserving, without risk, the memory of irreplaceable masterpieces. Why is the Mona Lisa in France and not Italy? The answer lies in Leonardo da Vinci's final years. In 1516, after the death of Giuliano de' Medici and tensions with Pope Leo XII, who deemed him unreliable for failing to deliver a commissioned work, Leonardo left Rome. He accepted an invitation from Francis I, a French king passionate about Italian culture, and moved to Amboise in the Loire Valley. There, at the Château du Clos-Lucé, he spent his last 3 years surrounded by his favorite pupils, the loyal Francesco Melzi and the controversial Gian Giacomo Caprotti, known as Salai, the latter infamous for his rebellious nature. Francis I offered Leonardo a generous salary and a comfortable residence in exchange for architectural designs, festival scenography, and mechanical inventions. Though he painted no new works, he refined those he had brought with him, including the Mona Lisa. Upon his death in 1519, it remains unclear whether Leonardo himself sold the painting to the French king the prior year, or if Salai did. The only certainty is that the painting entered the royal collections legally, unlike many Italian works later looted by Napoleon. Today, while Clos-Lucé displays a copy, the original dominates the Louvre, symbolizing a historic bond between Italy and France. After being displayed at the Château de Fontainebleau, the Mona Lisa was moved to Versailles under Louis XIV, and later, during the French Revolution, to the Louvre, where, as heritage of the nation and sovereign people, all had the right to admire it. In 1800, it captivated Napoleon, who took it to the Tuileries Palace, but after his imperial coronation, it returned to the museum. This is where its fame began. Before 1911, the Mona Lisa was a painting admired by few connoisseurs, kept at the Louvre without special security. Everything changed on August 21st of that year, when Vincenzo Peruggia, an Italian house painter who had worked at the museum, exploited a closure day to remove the painting from the wall, wrap it in his coat, and flee, believing he was returning it to its homeland. The theft, dubbed the crime of the century, sparked media hysteria. Newspapers devoted endless pages to the story, selling millions of copies. Gabriele D'Annunzio drew inspiration for an unrealized film, while crowds flocked to the Louvre just to gaze at the empty space on the wall, fueling myths and legends. After months of fruitless searches, investigators even suspected poet Guillaume Apollinaire and painter Pablo Picasso. 2 years later, Peruggia, who had hidden the painting in a suitcase under his bed, wrote to Florentine art dealer Alfredo Geri, offering to return the Mona Lisa on the condition it remain in Italy. Geri contacted Uffizi director Giovanni Poggi, who, after verifying its authenticity, alerted authorities. The thief was arrested but, deemed mentally unstable at trial, received a lenient sentence. Just over a year in prison, later reduced to 7 months. The authenticated painting embarked on a triumphant tour, first at the Uffizi, then Palazzo Farnese, and finally Galleria Borghese in Rome, before returning to Paris in 1914, welcomed by the French president as a national hero. Thus, it became a global myth. The Mona Lisa left the Louvre again in the 20th century. During World War II, it was hidden in French castles and abbeys to evade the Nazis. In 1962, Culture Minister André Malraux sent it to the United States as a diplomatic symbol. Admired by the Kennedys, it drew over 1 million visitors, each granted 4 seconds of fame before her smile. In 1974, it flew to Tokyo to strengthen ties with Japan, despite protests over risks. But its history was also marked by attacks. In 1956, a Bolivian tourist hurled a stone at the painting, damaging the left elbow in a politically motivated act. In 1974, a woman threw red paint at it in Tokyo, and in 2009, a Russian visitor smashed a cup against its bulletproof glass. Paradoxically, each attack amplified its mystique. The Mona Lisa's extraordinary fame is mirrored in artistic reproductions across eras. 3 notable copies or variants have sparked debates over authorship and timing, proving that even replicas are shrouded in mystery. The Prado Mona Lisa. created in Leonardo's workshop, likely by pupils Salai or Francesco Melzi alongside the original. Housed at Madrid's Prado Museum, it's the oldest and most faithful copy. The background has brighter hues, closer to the Louvre version's presumed original state. Unlike the Parisian painting, the woman has thin eyebrows, now faded in the original. After a 2012 restoration, it was reevaluated as a crucial record of Leonardo's creative process, the St. Petersburg Mona Lisa. Emerging in 2015 from a Russian private collection, this version features 2 lateral columns. The model appears younger, with a less elaborate architectural landscape. Attribution to Leonardo is disputed, though scientific studies of the canvas and pigments align with his era. Some scholars suggest it may be a 17th century French copy. The Isleworth Mona Lisa, or Swiss Mona Lisa. Purchased before World War I by an English collector in Isleworth, London, now in a Swiss private collection. Painted on canvas, not wood, and slightly larger, the model is younger, with a more pronounced smile and a plainer background framed by columns. Some experts claim it's Leonardo's work, possibly an early study for the original. Others remain skeptical, citing technical differences. Carbon-14 dating places it in the early 16th century, though the canvas support is atypical for Leonardo. While past artists replicated it as an exercise, 20th century avant-garde movements transformed it into a symbol to challenge. The most iconic attack came in 1919 from Dadaist Marcel Duchamp, who drew a mustache and goatee on a reproduction, adding a provocative acronym to desecrate its myth. Post-war, the Mona Lisa became a pop icon, its image consumed by commercial culture and mass reproduction, making her face globally recognizable. While this eroded her mystical aura, it cemented her role as a universal symbol adaptable to every era and language. To conclude this journey of discovery into the Mona Lisa's mystery, a captivating theory proposes that the painting might not depict Lisa Gherardini at all, but rather another woman entirely. Who? A clue emerges from the diary of Antonio de Beatis, secretary to Cardinal Luigi d'Aragona, who visited Leonardo in France in 1517. The artist showed the cardinal 3 paintings: St. John the Baptist, the Virgin and Child with St. Anne, and a portrait of a certain Florentine lady commissioned by Giuliano de' Medici. This detail disrupts the traditional narrative. If Giuliano, brother of Pope Leo X and Leonardo's patron in Rome between 1513 and 1516, was the patron, the Mona Lisa could not depict Lisa Gherardini, as Vasari claimed, nor have been started around 1503. Who then was the sitter? The answer may lie in Giuliano de' Medici's tumultuous life. Charming, cultured, and a lover of luxury and women, he had an affair with Pacifica Brandani, illegitimate daughter of a former gonfaloniere, Giovanni Antonio Brandani, during his stay in Urbino. From their union was born an illegitimate son, Ippolito, in 1511. Following Pacifica's death during childbirth, he was placed in an orphanage but later acknowledged by Giuliano. Historian Roberto Zapperi argues that around 1515, Giuliano asked Leonardo for a posthumous portrait of Pacifica as a memento for their son. Leonardo, who never met her, may have idealized her image based on descriptions or a small portrait. But why did de Beatis call her a Florentine lady rather than from the Marche region? Leonardo likely obscured her origins out of discretion, linking the painting to the Medici circle. Supporting this, Leonardo scholar Carlo Pedretti identifies a sketch in the Codex Atlanticus of a female eye with wavy hair, possibly a study for the Mona Lisa, dated to 1515, aligning with Giuliano's commission. The Pacifica theory remains debated. What's certain is that the Mona Lisa transcends mere portraiture. It is a mosaic of personal histories, secrets, and artistic genius, where even the sitter's identity mirrors Renaissance ambiguities. Enigmatic is not just the smile, but the entire story enveloping the work, suspended between reality and invention, as only Leonardo could conceive. The Mona Lisa is no longer a portrait. Each era sees what it desires. Enigma, feminine symbol, nature's allegory, even Leonardo's self-portrait. As art historian Kenneth Clark wrote, Her magic lies in the fact that she seems to know everything about us, while we will never know anything about her. This is the power of a work that, for 5 centuries, defies time. It doesn't tell a story. It becomes the story itself,